John Muir, who is anybody who's a naturalist, he's like, one of the big heroes. And also I'm an author, and Muir wrote a lot of books, and he was the one that came up here when nobody was coming. And he went into Glacier Bay with native guides in a canoe, and he called it an absolute fairyland. And he said that it's beyond description, that it's beyond words. And a lot of our passengers say, how do I fit it in a camera? It's just such a big, grandiose place. And what I love about it is no matter what perspective or personality people bring to seeing Glacier Bay, they can take something totally different from it because it has everything to offer.
One big thing about Glacier Bay is when you come here, you can kind of discover why these places are important and why it's worth protecting these places and why we need places like this more and more. They do feed our soul. They give us a chance to connect into some more real time and real things. This is as real as it gets. Glacier Bay, Wrangell St. Elias, Denali, big national parks, big wild areas, places where all the parts of the puzzle, all the pieces are all there. It's not just fragments, it's everything, the full ecosystem. And I think that's what draws a lot of people here, whether you work here and live here or whether you come here to visit. There's something to be said for having these intact ecosystems like we still do have here in Alaska, which is of course harder and harder to find in other places, but here we have that.
And when geologists go in there, they just scratch their heads because you can literally find nearly every rock on Earth, no matter how far from here, pressed and compacted into Glacier Bay. And then it's an ice laboratory because you have 15,000-foot mountains coming right out of the ocean. And the warm air from the Pacific slams into those tall peaks and produces precipitation year-round. So all of that snowfall year after year doesn't have time to melt, and it turns into ice, turns into glaciers that bulldoze down those mountains with the harsh weight of 1,000 winters combined. John Muir takes his canoe, 2 Indian guides. They go in there late 1800s. Even before Muir, Captain Vancouver, Captain Cook, who explored the first white explorers here in the Inside Passage. But when they came in here 250 years ago, they couldn't get into Glacier Bay because there was a wall of ice blocking the entrance of the bay 65 miles from the terminus or the end of Glacier Bay. That's basically how long it was. So John Muir, who was in Yosemite Valley, coming up with a theory that his beloved Yosemite Valley was carved by glaciers, but he wondered if there was a place on Earth where he could see actual proof. So he came up here late 1870s and was able to go into Glacier Bay about 40 miles and camp on Russell Island and see glaciers in action. And that proved to him by seeing that ice, carving the domes, rasping the rock, that was the same thing that happened as far south as California. After Muir, who wrote amazing poetry and emotion about what he felt taking his dog Stickeen up on the glaciers and almost dying and having these great adventures. And John Muir wrote about Glacier Bay and wilderness up here with all the fervor of a passion lover. And that's what people responded to, was he touched their hearts. So steamships started bringing tourists up here. And there weren't rules and regulations in those days, so the steamships used to go right up to the glacier faces. The crew would reach out with ice picks, and they would chip ice off the face of those calving, thundering glaciers. So the passengers would have ice in their cocktails for happy hour. So the tourists started coming after John Muir, and then the scientists started coming as well. Geologists started coming in. And all these scientists were the driving force they would go back to Washington, D.C. and constantly lobby the government. So it was a preserve for a while, I think under President Calvin Coolidge, and then about 40 years ago, it was declared a national park. And then in 1986, the United Nations got together and they made it a World Heritage Site. Very few places on Earth get that status. And at 3 million acres, Glacier Bay is the second biggest World Heritage Site in the world after Antarctica. To give an example, Marjorie Glacier, the sparkling blue younger glacier that's actually advancing about 4 to 6 feet a day in Glacier Bay. As it's flowing forward down that steep mountainside, that's a lot of pressure on the ice that's cracking. And when that ice hits the salt water, even though the water is very, very cold, it's warmer than the ice is. So it's high up, 250 feet tall at the top icy spires of Marjorie. It also extends that far down, the ice does, into the water, where it anchors an icy foot on a rock bed down there. So you've got that warm salt water, it's very corrosive. Chewing away at the bottom ice, you've got all that gravity, 21 miles down that steep mountainside, pushing those crevices and crevasses that are cracking forward. So when the ice weakens at the face, then the natives have a great description for the sound. It's called white thunder, and it does. It thunders, it reverberates through your soul forever. And the site, people remark, because it's 250 feet tall, that's a 25-story building. And sometimes we see a whole wall from the top spires to the water line crack off and crash into the sea. And it looks like it's falling in slow motion. It looks like you could count to 5 slowly before the ice smacks the sea. So you hear it, you see it, and sometimes in there we feel it. So 3 of your 5 senses are involved right there in the calving of a glacier. Just a magical experience.
One of the more special things about Glacier Bay is the calving. A lot of people come here to see that ice breaking off the face of the glacier. A really dramatic effect, and sometimes pieces that look tiny, they'll be the size of your house, and there'll be pieces that break off the size of skyscrapers, and you can hear that pop and that crack and that crashing down into the water, what we call white thunder, and a pretty amazing effect that happens there.
A lot of cruise passengers have told me, the naturalists, they go, Mike, I didn't expect Alaska to be a spiritual experience. But when I saw that color blue, I actually cried, because it's as if it painted my soul with that color. Scientifically, of all the colors that come from sunlight that enter our atmosphere, all the colors in the light spectrum that the human eye can see, of all those colors, blue vibrates the quickest. It has the highest frequency. So the other slower wavelength colors like greens, yellows, reds, orange, they have a slow vibration, slow wavelength. The ice can absorb them and hold them. But blue, it's too quick. It vibrates too fast. The ice can't hold it. So it bounces off the ice and reflects back to our eyes. And if it's a cloudy day, I'm happiest because the UV rays from the sunlight get screened out by the clouds, and when it's a bright sunny day, it kind of bleaches that blue color away. But when there's a cloud cover to screen out those sun rays, then we see so much more blue color in the hollows and pockets of the ice. So when it's cloudy and rainy, I'm dancing a jig and going, yeah, it's gonna be a blue day.
I think for a lot of us here, the passion comes from these wild places, these national parks. They are some of the last slices of these large natural areas, and Alaska is no better place. To me, Glacier Bay is wildness. It comes down here to a wide open area, wildness, wilderness, and a large area where, again, you have all the parts in place here. And you have a place with, of course, the scenery, the glaciers, and all the mountains as well. So to me, the biggest thing on Glacier Bay is wildness.
It's a transformative place. It touches people's souls. It brings them back again and again. They want to move here. There's very few places in the world that have that effect.